And welcome to another edition of the Twins Wrap here on the Mighty 790 KFGO. Derek Hanson with you, along with the television voice of the Minnesota Twins, Dick Bremer. And boy, what a way to kick off the season, huh? Friday night, you couldn't ask for anything better.
Yeah, and then the whole series in Chicago, 27 runs. It looks like they are going to pick up right where they left off last year. And I thought, hey, every series is going to be important this year, right? Because there aren't that many of them. But I really thought that was an important series for both the Twins and the White Sox, just to get off to a good start. I think we all know the White Sox have, designs on, unseating the Twins as division champs and figure to be contenders for many years to come. And they were ready. They were, I'm sure, delighted to have the Twins on the schedule right out of the chute. And the Twins took care of business and won the series.
It's interesting that you look at it, too, with 2019, all the talk about the home runs or whatever, and it just seems like you can talk baseballs or, juice baseballs or whatever. This team can just hit the ball a long ways. I mean, that's all. And we didn't even really have much from, Donaldson or some of the others either.
Yeah, and that's the way I think it'll play out this year. At least that would be the ideal scenario for the Twins. It was Nelson Cruz, at Jay Cave. In Chicago, and now, for this homestand, it might be Donaldson, it might be Rosario. I mean, when you're as deep as the Twins are, and as we found out, over the weekend, we're talking, Jake Cave, fourth outfielder deep. That's the way it should play out. That would be the ideal for Rocco Baldelli and for Twins fans, too, to just have, somebody step up and have a big game when you need it. And Nelson Cruz surely did that on Sunday.
Yeah, it's amazing. He looks like he could play till he's 45 years old. It's just amazing. I mean, I guess you can break down pretty quickly. I think I'm proof of that after I turned 35. But but I'm telling you, this guy, it's just amazing what he's able to do.
Yeah, and of course, he was on the bases a lot too. I mean, guy's 40 years old and he's cutting third base after a double and scoring, and he's just a wonderful player, a wonderful person. And I think the hope is that not only will he be playing beyond 2020, but he'll be playing in a Twins uniform beyond 2020.
Yeah, no doubt. And that is going to be something, I think. I mean, we just got into the season. I don't want to get into, looking too far ahead here. We've got to focus on these, 57 games that are left. But that is one thing I think they'll talk about considerably, don't you? I think he's a guy that they want around for a while, and he seems to be pretty happy in Minnesota.
Yeah, I think he is, and I think they'll probably, retain him beyond this year. But just think, Derek, now, what's going to happen because in all likelihood, the DH, which both leagues are using this year, will also be used down the road. And so now instead of 15 teams that would be in the market for a 40, 41-year-old designated hitter, there will be 30 teams. And so the market for the Nelson Cruzes of the world very likely is going to get, really, really hot. And as you said, Cruz, I think, enjoys it in Minnesota. But, retaining DHs is going to be a lot more difficult if, in fact, the National League adopts the DH after this year.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I never even thought of that because his price tag will jump up in a quick hurry if he keeps on doing what he's doing so far. As far as just kind of looking at some other things that really stuck out for me this past weekend, Miguel Sano looking like all the Kent Hrbek and Doug Mientkiewicz at some point, stretching out and picking balls out of the dirt. I mean, I'll be honest, that was one of my biggest concerns coming into this season, and knock on wood, so far so good on that. That was shocking to me.
Yeah, he showed some deft footwork over the weekend. And it's apparent, I hope, that he's bought into this transition to first base a whole lot more than he did the transition to right field a few years ago. He's pretty well suited, I guess, in terms of his physique at first base, a little better suited than third base. He's still got, a tremendous arm, but even that from time to time will come in handy. He had to make a throw as he was shifted and going to his right towards second base. He had to pivot and, make an on-target throw to the pitcher covering. And, just, little things like that. Some guys have a hard time with that transition. Joe Mauer would tell you, as great an athlete as he was, that was not an easy transition for him at first base. And, of course, years and years ago, the Twins had Dave Winfield, who would have been an ideal first baseman. 6'6", 6'7", big target over there, great athlete. He never did take the first base. So the early signs are that Miguel Sano has taken to it pretty well.
Yeah, it's funny. Last thing on this is that he wasn't all that big on moving to right field, and that just turned out to be a total debacle. But he really was in favor of Josh Donaldson coming in, moving over to first base. And, boy, when the player buys in, that really makes a difference.
Well, and then years ago, he was moved to right field to accommodate Trevor Plouffe. And no disrespect to Trevor, but Josh Donaldson, is a former league MVP. You'd expect Miguel or anybody to say, yeah, I'll move over for that guy, right? I mean, when you get an MVP, a former league MVP, added to the team, you go wherever you can to add him to the roster. And so, yeah, I think it's fair to say Miguel's bought into it, has spent, a lot of time in two training camps, the 3 weeks or so that we had down in Florida, and then the 3 weeks or so here. And so he's gotten some reps, although his second training camp was crimped short because of the positive COVID test. But so far, so good.
Yeah, it's a great thing to see, that is for sure. I want to focus a little bit on the pitching. Obviously, with Rich Hill being on the shelf and Jake Odorizzi sounds like he's throwing more. Hopefully, he'll be back sooner than later. But, the way they started things off on Saturday with Randy Dobnak coming in, and it kind of looked like it was maybe going to be one of these opener games like they had in that day-night doubleheader in Cleveland last year in September. That was such a pivotal weekend for the Twins. But it just didn't turn out that way. That really got out of hand in a quick hurry, and you got to think where the Twins would have been. You'd be talking maybe about being an undefeated team if they could have had all their bullets in the chamber, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, although, Randy Dobnak did fine. He pitched 4 innings, gave up 1 run. The game kind of exploded when Zach Littell gave up 3 home runs in 1 inning.
Yeah.
So, we've talked at length for weeks, Derek, about the depth of the Twins' rotation. And there'll be other things that'll come along here, too. In this case, it was Odorizzi. Had a bit of an issue in his upper back behind his shoulder. But it looks like he'll be ready to go later in this homestand. So Dobnak stepped in, did a nice job. We might see Devin Smeltzer step in a little bit later on. So, it sounds strange, but depth is going to be even more important, I suspect, in this shortened season than it is in a 162-game season, because everybody had to ramp up so quickly. You look at what's happened around baseball, pitchers that have gotten hurt, Corey Kluber, Justin Verlander. These are top-flight pitchers, and you certainly don't wish that on anybody. But you're going to have depth, going to have depth this year if you're going to get through the 60-game schedule and advance to the postseason.
Yeah, and I guess you can have a situation like you had with the Miami Marlins, too, where you might lose some pitchers in that situation. And a lot of people have asked me about this, and I thought Commissioner Manfred, for all his faults the past couple months, I think he handled it pretty well, because my answer to it has been, well, this is essentially why you have a 60-man roster, right? For situations, whether it be injury or COVID-related or whatever, that's why you're having this big practice squad, essentially.
Yeah, I think all of us were really concerned yesterday at this time when we heard about the breadth of the infection with the Marlins. But if they were going to call the season off because of one outbreak, they never would have started it in the first place. I think everybody knew that this was not only possible but likely to happen at some point. You just didn't want to have it happen, the first weekend. But if people react properly to this, big key is going to be whether the Phillies were infected. People are trying to trace where the Marlins became infected, and it might have been in their exhibition series against the Braves because the Brave catchers came down with it. But if it can be limited to the Marlins, I think baseball will very easily be able to get past this with precautions in place. I said on Twitter last night, and I don't have any way of knowing this, but I suspect where this is headed is masks will be mandatory in the dugout, covering both the nose and the mouth. We saw over the weekend in Chicago, in the Chicago dugout, there were masks worn, but just over the mouth. I suspect we'll have mandatory mask wearing in the dugout and then optional out on the field, but we'll wait and see how that all plays out.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you whatsoever. let's get to, and I think, we got, I'm not sure what happened there, but I do think it's going to be one of those things, too, where we talk so much about the bubbles or whatever that we have with so many of these different places like the NBA and NHL, and that's not the way that Major League Baseball is handling things, so it's going to be a little tough. It's going to be a little different for Major League Baseball.
Yeah, and I think, to be fair, it's easier for hockey and basketball to do that because they're at the end of their seasons. It would be akin to having the regular season in the books for baseball and then doing the playoffs in a bubble. But this is different. You've got 30 franchises. You're trying to put together a representative, regular season, and then hope you can play in the postseason. And so it's apples to oranges, really, in terms of comparing the different sports. But it's, you've got to play the hand that you're dealt, and that's the hand that baseball's been dealt. And so we'll see how it plays out. And let's hope on many levels that the Marlins outbreak is limited in scope and that it's not going to spread, from team to team.
Yeah, for sure. I think when you look at this, too, with everything that's going on right now, it's so interesting to see. There's a lot of players out there right now and a lot of teams that you can see that there's a lot of hope with a lot of these teams that you wouldn't think would normally have hope. You know what I mean? I think you're seeing that early on just with what we're seeing in the standings and everything else and some of the scores I've been checking out. It's really kind of odd.
Yeah, it's only one weekend, 5% of the season, but it works in reverse, too. The Astros were dealt a terrible blow with Verlander out for an extended part of the season, if not the entire regular season. And they've got a bunch of sore-armed relief pitchers, too, after the first weekend. So the theory that with 16 teams are going to be some unexpected teams in the postseason field, there very likely could be some other teams that everyone thought were shoo-ins to be in the postseason who might not make it, depending on the health. So much of what is going to happen this year, Derek, in terms of who's going to get to the postseason and who's going to win the tournament at the end, probably has more to do with what happens off the field and how players conduct themselves on the road trips, so on and so forth. Maybe more so than at any time in any other baseball season. So the team that disciplines itself the best in terms of going out to restaurants or what have you on the road is probably going to stand the best chance of being there at the end.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you whatsoever. I think it's going to be one of those interesting things to see, where this actually goes with everything. And you mentioned the tournament. We maybe have buried the lead there, but there is kind of pretty much a tournament right now. They are going to have an actual, they expanded the playoffs. And you and I talked before, it didn't look like they were going to do that early on, but I'm glad they came to that agreement.
Yeah, I think, let's say you don't wish this, of course, but let's say the Twins had a 6-7 game losing streak. Well, if you're going to cut the playoff field at 10, a losing streak, and they're pretty common, right? The Twins' longest losing streak last year was 4 games. That was extraordinary. But if you had a losing streak, a really bad week, you could still recover with 16 teams in the postseason rather than 10. So again, you don't hope for losing streaks, but I think it proved that you can have a bad week in this shortened season and still have some hope of being there at the end.
Well, hopefully everything will get going here pretty quickly and no stops in action or whatever, and we get things going here against the Cardinals, which should be a pretty intriguing series here. And it'll be nice to be at Target Field because how was that experience for you? To be honest with you, as a viewer, as a listener with Corey and Dan and them, it didn't really feel all that much different for us as a listener, I think.
Well, I've heard that from a number of people, and that's very soothing to hear because that's the biggest challenge. Whether you're doing the game conventionally, as I will, I'll actually be able to see the Twins on the field at Target Field tonight, or trying to call the game from the monitor. You don't want that to detract from the enjoyment of the listener or the viewer. That's the challenge all of us are facing, and so we'll see how that goes. Hopefully it gets just a little bit better, but to the extent that people weren't able to tell that we were not in Chicago over the weekend, well, that means that our crew, all of us, did a nice job trying to simulate something that wasn't real. and hopefully, again, it'll get better as we do more of them that way.
Yeah, well, I'm looking forward to it. Should be fun again starting tonight. Thanks so much. Enjoy the call from home this week. I'm certainly looking forward to it.
Yeah, we'll talk to you next Tuesday.